Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. True God in Another Worlds, Tensura x Tbate, by Tempest_King_20. Chapter 29. The Auction House. Rimuru. Pav. Over 2 months, I started teaching Lily the basics of mana manipulation for conjurers. As we progressed, I could see her making significant progress, and I was confident that she would become an adept conjurer. So I started to train her in the arts of self-defense along with conjurer lessons. I also started teaching my baby sister mana manipulation, and her progress in mana manipulation was evident. It seems that she quickly entered a period of stability where she could concentrate without me or my brother being with her. I didn't need to inform my parents and the Helsta family of the importance of remaining silent on this as well, but it was pretty obvious the 4 of them were excited for the day Ellie was ready. Sylvie has been sleeping a lot more these 2 months, but noticeable changes have occurred. Her intelligence had increased tremendously, and she could now understand and display emotions more complex than just hunger or sleep. Furthermore, she had learned a transformation skill that allowed her to change her appearance. The timing of this new skill was perfect as she was starting to grow considerably in size, and the transformation helped her keep a low profile in public. In the meantime, both Vincent and Tabitha kept insisting on delivering more gifts to us as thanks. Even if I wasn't making a deal with Vincent about cloaks or masks, after all, she was from the family that had been helping my family in difficult times, as well as she's kind of my childhood friend. After countless refusals of gifts, we finally came to an agreement: we would get a sword. Both of our bodies were now minuscule enough to be able to use small weapons without any problems, so Art and I could train blade techniques without having to use sticks of wood. We were thinking about both our families going to visit the 10th anniversary Helsta auction. Waiting in the living room downstairs for our father and Vince to get ready, we heard an obnoxious knock from the front door. A smile made its way to my lips as I recognized a familiar mana signature. When my brother opened the door, I could see him choking between Angela's breasts. "Who's the oof?" Art wanted to ask who was there but got squashed by Angela. A classic way of assassination, I thought to myself, amused by the irony of the situation. "Oh my goodness. Look how big you've gotten. I'm so sorry, Art. I wasn't able to protect you. I'm so glad," the lady sniffled. MMPH, MMMFPH, Art was trying to escape the hug from a woman. "Angela, I don't think he can breathe," a comforting voice pointed out. "Eep. Sorry," Angela squealed. Peeling his face away, Art smiled at the sight of our companions. "It's so good seeing you guys again," Art said. Our giant guardian angel, Durden, patted Art's head, and I saw his narrow eyes getting watery, triggering a tear from Art as well. Adam smacked Art on the butt. "Little brat. Do you know how devastated everyone was because of what happened? It's good to see you again, hee. You've gotten better looking, Arthur." Art turned to see Helen with her signature bow still strapped to her back squatting down in front of him. She lightly pinched Art's cheek and gave him a sympathetic smile before standing back up. Jasmine followed them and hugged Art before standing up and coming to me. "It's good to see you all," I said, smiling at them as I hugged Jasmine. "We're just glad to see that you're all right," Helen said. You're here too. Sorry you're so weak that I didn't feel you," Adam said with a wry smile. "Has anyone heard a dog barking?" I said, making everyone laugh as Adam's face turned red in embarrassment. "Oh, that's you. Adam, are you okay? I remember you passed out the last time you were here." I continued to mock Adam. Everyone chuckled at my playful banter with Adam. At this time, Sylvie woke up from her nap on the couch and trotted towards us. "Whoa, what is that?" Adam exclaimed. The rest of the twin horns had the same expression of surprise as even Jasmine turned back to look at the mysterious mana beast. "She's my contracted beast, Sylvie," I announced while my bond hopped on top of my head. "Holy crap. Do you already have a contracted beast? Do you know how valuable it is to have a bond? Oh man, I've been trying to look for a beast to tame these past few years but with no luck. The ones that they sell are way too expensive, too, lucky brat." Adam was practically pulling his hair out in jealousy. "What's with all the commotion down? Oh, you guys are here." My father, wearing his uniform, leapt down the flight of stairs and rushed toward his ex-party members. Everyone was happy to see each other again, so it was a happy scene. Until Jasmine, Helen, and Angela noticed Ellie on my mother's lap. "Oh my goodness, Alice. Ellie looks just like you. She's going to grow up to be so pretty. Cute. Ray is going to have his hands full soon with potential candidates. Cuckoo. Can you tell me how old you are?" 4. Uncle Vincent came downstairs with Aunt Tabitha and Lily, mother and father both wearing matching black clothes, while Lily was wearing a beautiful black and gold dress that sparkled in the light. After everyone regards, we decided to go together with the twin horns to the Helsta auction house for the 10th anniversary event. On the way there, Art told a little more about what happened after our fall, since they wanted to hear his side of the story. Lilia. Arriving there, the first thing I thought about was how Vincent had really worked hard for this. The place was breathtaking, with countless embellishments and incredible architecture that I could say mixed the styles of the human and elven realms. Because we arrived early, there were only guards and workers present, preparing for the event. We were informed by Vincent that we would stay in the VIP room that was close to the ceiling of the main auction hall. Arriving there, I sat near the window, seeing the large hall that held several high-class people. My dad and the twin horns were scheduled to stay out of the room, for they would begin to look around and work with the guards. Art sat beside me, with Sylvie sleeping hidden inside my clothes. We could hear more and more sounds of people entering the place. We could see the chairs downstairs being filled. Without a doubt, they were all groups of nobles from the kingdom. They all kept talking to each other, making my attention go to Lily, who was teaching Ellie a childish game that consisted of clapping. I couldn't help myself. I smiled seeing the simple fun they were making. When one made a mistake in the game, she received a gentle tug on the ear of the other as punishment. Time seemed to pass slowly and peacefully there, until Vincent returned, leading a group of unfamiliar people into the VIP room. Arthur Lewin Pav. I was sprawled out on the couch, watching my little sister and Lilia play, when Uncle Vincent walked in with a group of people I didn't recognize. I sat up, curious, as they moved in the VIP room, and Uncle Vincent gestured for us to come along. The first to come behind him was an elderly man with long, deep red hair that was aged with streaks of gray. The man's eyes were stern with harsh, sword-shaped eyebrows, giving him an undeniably eye-catching presence. He was wearing a red robe lined with white fur around the collar and had a cane that shined brighter than any silver I had previously seen. Trailing closely behind him was a lady that looked a few years older than my mother. While my mother had a lovely, sweet, friendly ambience, this lady's facial features reminded me of an ice sculpture. She was wearing a shimmering silvery white dress that complemented her dark blue hair that draped over her shoulders like a well-kept tapestry. Positioned behind the woman, who appeared to me as the spouse of the man, were two delightful youngsters who unmistakably bore a striking resemblance to the couple. The elder child, a boy who seemed to be approximately 13 years old, distinctly inherited his father's features. Though his charm exhibited a raw and untamed quality, it undeniably rendered him the focal point of any gathering. On the other hand, the younger sibling, a girl seemingly around the same age as myself, attentively scanned the room, meticulously observing her surroundings until her gaze eventually met the eyes of my brother and me. I could see that she was like Tess in a way, but the complete opposite in another. Her porcelain white complexion was a canvas for her meticulously carved facial features. Her penetratingly sharp eyes, her hair glaring black like her mom, and her small lips with a soft pink shade, she looked more a doll than everything else. Peeling my eyes off of the girl in front of me, I focused on the three guards that followed after the picturesque family. "I didn't know we would be in here with guests, Vincent," the man said, neither harshly nor kindly. "I apologize, Your Majesty. I assumed you wouldn't mind having a few other people with you. You remember my wife, Tabitha, Rig? Well, these are our close family friends," he introduced, waving his arm in our direction. After regarding us for a moment, his lips curled up into a smile. "If they are your friends, Vincent, then they are mine as well. It's a pleasure to meet you. At least we'll have some company besides the guards," the lady giggled. I raised an eyebrow in surprise at the sharp contrast in the woman's personality to her appearance. She seemed much more welcoming, despite her intimidating looks, than her husband. "Everyone, as you all may know, I'd like you all to meet the King and Queen of Sapin. Introduce yourselves to King Blaine Glader and Queen Priscilla Glader and their children, Curtis and Kathy L.N." At his, my mother, Tabitha, and even Lilia dropped down, genuflecting. I caught on and lowered myself a moment later as well, but I saw Ri, who was holding my sister, he wasn't doing the same. He didn't even bow to them or give them any sign of acknowledging their existence, he just sit there holding Ellie without looking at them. It made sense though. I guess I can't blame him, after all he's a god. He won't kneel down to just a human king. Giving us a nod, the king gestured for us to stand, but before he also was looking at my brother because he was the only one who wasn't genuflecting. No more of this, now. No need to be stiff, we're just here for the auction, after all. As we all rose, I could feel the tension in the air. Ri was still sit there, and our sister on his lap, while the rest of us exchanged pleasantries with the royal family. Sylvie, who was sleeping hidden inside my brother's clothes, got up and jumped on my shoulder as she curiously surveyed the royal family's faces. "Q," she trilled, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "Oh my! What a cute little mana beast." Queen Priscilla's face brightened up at the sight as she made her way towards me. The king and the two children's eyes looked towards our direction as well. The guards took a step forward as well, making sure they were close enough to react in case something happened to the queen. "She just hatched a few months ago. Her name is Sylvie. Come out and say hello," I responded. "Q," she cooed while waving her hand. "I assume this little mana beast is your bond, young man?" The king came closer, kneeling down to get a closer view of Sylvie. I shook my head. "No, it's my brother's bond. How fortunate he is to have a mana beast. Even infant ones are not easy to tame, yet she looks to be very obedient." "Yeah, my brother already said, she hatched a few months ago, and was only with us near. So actually she treats us as father and uncle in some way," I said. "And how you could know this?" The king looked confused at me. "Well, because my brother tells me what she is thinking with, some type of mentally communication." "What do you mean? He have an equal contract with this creature. Let me examine your bond," a voice bellowed out from among the guards. One of the hooded figures had revealed himself, and I cursed inwardly for my slip of the tongue. I knew I shouldn't have said that. Before either of us could decline, the king stepped in. "This isn't the time nor place to study someone else's pet. You're being rude, Sebastian," he rebuked the guard, his gaze turning harsh. "My apologies," he said, hoping I'd complete the sentence. Arthur Lewin," I finished, giving a curt bow. As he and his wife gave me a small smile, we took our seats in time to hear the clear voice declaring that the auction would start soon. A cold shiver made me turn back just to see Sebastian, who had taken off his hood. He was staring intently at Sylvie, who was nestled on my brother's lap. He also saw this. "Sorry," I whispered to my brother, apologizing for my mistake. "Don't worry, everyone makes mistakes, and if he tries to do something, well, I guess it won't end well for him," he responded, giving me a reassuring smile, which quickly turned into a cold smile that gave me goosebumps. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I say that it is of the highest honor for me to be here tonight? All of you are gathered here today for one reason and one reason only, I presume? It is to have the chance to obtain rare and valuable items in this auction." Applause thundered in enthusiasm at the old gentleman's ardent introduction. If everyone in the audience would now kindly turn to face the back room at the very yup, we have a few exceedingly important figures that have decided to bless us with their presence. Please join me in welcoming the King and Queen of Sapin. The auctioneer was the first to flick out the trail of his suit and genuflect. The audience immediately followed suit, lowering themselves respectfully in a bow since they couldn't kneel in their seats. The king and queen, in response, stepped out towards the window in front of me and waved their arms slowly in a practiced motion. Next, the one that made this whole event possible. Please give a big round of applause for Vincent Helsta. The auctioneer's introduction was followed by another round of applauses as Uncle Vincent stepped up next to the king and queen, giving a deep bow in return. After this, the event finally started, and after the auctioneer introduced the royal family and Uncle Vincent, the rare items were auctioned off one after the other, and while the adults were busy commenting on the items with Blaine and Priscilla making some bids themselves, we kids were bored out of our minds. I fidgeted in my seat, boredom gnawing at me as I spotted a glass of alcohol. Thinking no one was looking, I grabbed it, but my brother caught me in the act. Disappointment flashed across his face as he shook his head. "Would you like some?" I asked, hoping to diffuse the awkwardness. "Sigh, unfortunately I can't." "Disappointed," he replied, his tone heavy with disappointment. I raised my eyebrows at that. "Seal," he said, and I knew what he meant. Hey, I couldn't help but smirk at him playfully, eager to tease him, but before I could continue my teasing, I felt his gravity magic suddenly surround me, catching me off guard. I stumbled slightly, trying to regain my balance as he looked down at me with a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Don't make fun of your big brother, kid," he said, his eyes sparkling with mischievousness. Before I could respond, Mom's voice cut through our playful banter. "Art, why don't you two take the others and go play over there?" she suggested suddenly, nodding towards a corner of the room that had been cleared up for the younger guests. Ree and I exchanged wary glances. We didn't want to be responsible for the royal kids, but before we could say anything, Mom shot us a withering look, and we knew better than to argue. Ree sighed, resigned to his fate, while Sylvie giggled at his expense. "Prince Curtis, Princess Kathy LN, why don't you join us on the other side?" I asked, gesturing towards Ree and Ellie and Lilia who were sitting on the couches on the other side of the room. The Queen noticed my presence near her son and spoke up. "Of course, it's better for my little one to be with people closer to his age. Curtis, could you take your sister too?" she said with a soft smile. "Yes, Mother," Curtis answered with a wave of relief on his face. He was glad that I took him out of there. One of the guards along with Sebastian decided to approach us, saying they would stand guard. I knew Sebastian was there to analyze my niece, but luckily, Curtis saw that there was no point in them getting so close, since we were all in the same room, just sitting far apart. The prince thus asked the two guards to leave, and they obeyed, but I could feel that Sebastian only obeyed the prince because we were in the Queen's peripheral vision. "Prince Curtis, Princess Kathy LN, what would you like to do?" I asked them. "Before that, please just call us by our names, no need for our titles or polite speech," Curtis declared. A smile played at my lips as I accepted his proposition. "If you're fine with it, okay." As the atmosphere loosened, we started engaging in lighthearted banter and small talk. Curtis, being naturally extroverted, made it easy for me to strike up a conversation about swords, an interest we shared. Meanwhile, Sylvie joined Kathy LN, Lilia, and Ellie in playful activities, their laughter filling the air. "Ah, Uncle Vincent, as for our birthday gifts, so as not to disturb the other nobles, we could go get an item from the stock when the event is over. What do you think, brother?" Ree said. Uncle Vincent and I agreed with what he said. As we approached the latter half of the auction, the items began increasing in value. As more and more items were sold off, my interest started to deplete until a large, square container, covered by a sheet, was rolled out onto the stage by a few workers. I couldn't help but grow agitated as the auctioneer removed the sheet, revealing a cage full of females chained together with only a dirty sack to cover their private areas. It disgusted me as so many noblemen frantically began bidding on the young female slaves that were soon stripped to show their assets like animals. I realized that being born in a small town with people who disagreed with the idea of having slaves had made me almost forget the fact that slaves existed in this world. Most countries in my world abolished slavery hundreds of years ago, so the idea of owning a slave was something that I just couldn't get used to. It was why when we were fighting wars we would never side with a country allowing slavery. The taste of metal in my mouth brought me back to reality. Realizing that I had bit down too hard on my lower lip, I quickly wiped the blood off of my lips with my finger. The tension in the room continued to escalate, and I could feel the anger radiating off of Rimuru. His fists were clenched at his sides, and his jaw was set in a firm line. I could see the barely contained fury in his posture. It was clear he too was struggling to keep his emotions in check. Uncle Vincent's face flashed with guilt, but he quickly regained composure. I'm sure he was against this, but it couldn't be helped that the popularity and demand for slaves were too high. In a sudden burst of anger, my brother rose from his seat, his tone dripping with frustration. "I'm going out for a moment," he said sharply, passing Sylvie into my care before storming out of the room. I was taken aback by his sudden outburst and could only watch as he left the room. Sylvie looked up at me with wide and curious eyes, sensing that something was wrong. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do or say. Reluctantly, I turned my attention back to the auction. As the auction drew to a close, I realized that Sylvie had disappeared from her seat. My heart rate spiked as I frantically scanned the room. It wasn't until I spotted a hooded figure trying to take her, that my blood began to boil with an unfamiliar fury. A seething fury I had never known before ignited inside me, suffusing my entire being with an unruly blaze. The once luxurious surroundings blurred into a sea of insignificance as my sole focus became rescuing Sylvie from the clutches of this malicious interloper. "Let's go, Sylvie," I commanded, my voice laced with a protective urgency that mirrored the fierce devotion I felt for her. The hooded figure, revealed to be the guard Sebastian, sneered at me with unmistakable disdain. His cruel words cut through the atmosphere like a blade, his malicious intent thinly veiled. "A countryside commoner has no right frolicking around with such a special beast," he spat, the venomous intent unmistakable in his tone. My blood boiled with a potent blend of shock and anger, as his audacity and entitlement dripped from his every word. The tempestuous storm raging within me heightened as his words echoed in my mind, the audacity of his claim defying all logic. "What?" I seethed, my voice trembling with indignant rage. "I'm saying that she will be mine," he repeated, his tone filled with arrogance and entitlement. I felt my blood pressure spike as he repeated his words, his arrogance and entitlement making my skin crawl. "Say that again," I growled, my own anger reaching a boiling point. "Vincent Helsta Pav, Your Majesty, I hope you're finding it worthwhile to visit this humble auction house of ours," I assured, lowering myself. "This place and event was anything but humble, Vincent, and yes, I'm not sure how you managed to secure an A- class beast core from a silver coat bear, but you've managed to build quite the network. Let's just hope that the beast will is still intact." He clasped my back excitedly with his hand. "Don't get your hopes up too much, dear. You know how rare it is," I could hear the Queen mutter quietly in response. The Queen turned back to resume her conversation with Alice and my wife. They seemed to be discussing something about the kids. His Majesty and I turned our attention back to the main stage when, all of a sudden, a terrifyingly oppressive presence filled the room, constricting my body. I tried my hardest to move, to try and find the source of this domineering bloodlust, but my body refused to obey. What the hell was going on? This was the most secure area in the entire building, with the King's Guard inside, as well as my own, securing the outside of the room. My breathing turned shallow as the overbearing pressure continued gripping at my insides. I could feel beads of cold sweat slowly rolling down my face as if they, too, were afraid. But then, an even more intense aura flooded the room, yet strangely soothing aura, soothing the previous oppressive energy. I could recognize this aura from the number of times I saw my nephew, Rimuru, training. With much effort, my body relented a little and I was able to turn my gaze slightly to see if they knew what was going on. Even the King's guards couldn't move and we kneeling on the floor. It was clear that they were just as confused as I was. I had no idea what to expect next. I had assumed that I would live for quite a bit longer, yet here I was, at death's door, trying to struggle out of its icy grasp. What in hell's name was happening? Arthur Pav, damn it. I lost control. I quickly turned away from the pale-faced Sebastian currently shaking on the floor, hoping no one had noticed. I had only meant to give Sebastian a little scare, not to terrify every person in the room. Luckily, Rimuru had suppressed my killing intent, cutting it off before it could do any more harm. His aura was strangely calming, as if trying to soothe the fear and pain that I had caused. Taking a quick peek around, I let out a small sigh of relief after seeing that my mother and sister were okay. Mom was looking around, probably looking for us. She relaxed when she saw Ree holding Ellie, while my brother was looking at me. "You exaggerated," my brother Ree whispered in frustration, using a magic of voice spell so that only I could hear him. I know. I just lost control," I admitted, feeling ashamed. "I didn't think it would be this bad with this body of mine." This was the first time letting my killing intent loose. Even when I was up against the slave traders, I had chosen not to emit any kind of intent in order to catch them by surprise. The King's Augmenter guards had their weapons unsheathed and positioned to defend around the royal family by the time I had withdrawn the pressure I had exerted onto the room, even though Rimuru had already suppressed it. "Who's there? You dare try and attack the royal family?" the king roared as he pushed his wife and children behind him. Queen Priscilla had her wand out and was silently muttering a spell as she herded her frightened children, as well as my mother, behind her husband and the guards. Vincent used an artifact in his hands to call for more guards inside and had the others scout the area for any assassins that may be, or had been, nearby. Time ticked slowly for me as everyone in the room was in a state of panic and tension. My mother had a tight grip on my arm, one hand protectively shielding Ree and Ellie, who clung to her leg. as guards ran around with weapons held close. My father had stopped by, but, after making sure that we were okay, left to try and search for the mysterious attacker. It wasn't until they confirmed killing an intruder on the roof of the auction house that everyone had calmed down. Ri and I let out a sigh of relief, but unlike everyone else, our relief wasn't for the fact that the intruder had been killed, but the fact that we had been provided with a convenient scapegoat. Thank you, intruder, on the roof. Your sacrifice was not in vain. Sebastian regarded me suspiciously for a moment but said nothing else as he turned away in disdain. Oi Sebastian. How could a royal guard fall on his ass and shit himself by a little intimidation from an intruder? You're going to die early like this. A hooded augmenter holding a spear shook his head, trying to sound tough in front of his comrades. I merely slipped. Sebastian snarled, slapping away the hand that one of the guards held out. He regarded me suspiciously for a moment but said nothing else as he turned away in disdain and left the room to clean himself of his own filth. Now, for the final item, we have up for the lucky individual fortunate enough to acquire this. The auctioneer's dramatic voice echoed from below as another cage covered by a silky cloth was dragged on stage. Everyone in the room was still noticeably tense from the initial shock of an intruder, but their attention was now focused back onto the stage after Uncle Vincent announced he had been killed. After a dramatic pause, the tarp covering the cage was removed, revealing a small feline animal the size of a large dog. The auctioneer bellowed at that exact moment, an infant world lion. For those who are ignorant of this magnificent mana beast, an adult world lion has the capability to at least become a B-class mana beast. I dare say that if taken care of well, this infant world lion could even become an A- class mana beast. Do you know what this means? Taking care of and treasuring this fine beast will allow its master to become a legendary beast tamer. The audience below us erupted into a frenzy as hands shot into the air, bidding without even waiting for the auctioneer. To my surprise, King Glader smacked the glass with his hand as his eyes stayed glued to the mana beast. Having never traversed to the beast glades, I was intrigued by Cub as well. Sebastian walked over to the edge of the room as well to get a better view of the mana beast currently on display. However, he merely let out a dissatisfied snort before walking back, getting another greedy eyeful of Sylvie. Now, I won't be able to start the bidding until everyone gets settled. The auctioneer shook his fingers with a satisfied grin plastered on his face as he waited for the crowd to sedate. As the bidders all reluctantly settled, the auctioneer finally announced the starting bid. We will start at 100 gold. Back in Ashbur, 10 silver coins were more than enough to feed a family of 4 for a year. Of course, there were obviously luxury foods that totaled astronomical amounts, but simply by going off of that standard, 100 silver coins, which amounted to a single gold coin, would be more than enough to feed a family of 4 for 10 years. Growing up in the humble outpost of a town, I had never realized how much money was truly spent by the affluent class. Immediately, the price for the world lion soared. Soon, it passed 400 gold and the bidders had no intention of stopping. 500 gold, 550, 600, 700, 1500 gold coins. The king bellowed into a voice-amplifying artifact. Simply by hearing their king's voice, the crowd's incessant bidding stopped. It was obvious that, while there were plenty who could afford to bid higher, they were more debating on whether it was worth bidding against their own king. It didn't seem fair once the king stepped in, but he at least had the decency to put up a high enough price. After the auctioneer counted off, the price was eventually settled at 1,500 gold coins or 1 white gold tablet and 5 gold. The white gold tablet was something I'd only seen in books and pictures. Uncle Vincent walked up to the king with his hand held out. Seems like no one wants to bid against you, King Glader, he congratulated. 1 white gold tablet and 500 gold shouldn't be too unfair, right? The king joked as he peered back down onto the stage, obviously excited. Thank you for the consideration. Vincent chuckled in defeat. What are your plans with the new royal pet? Will you use it for yourself, or perhaps give it to your son? While tempting it is for me to acquire a bond, I'm thinking of giving it to Curtis, he said casually. Of course, that all depends on how he does, he finished, patting his son's head. Dad. Prince Curtis, whose face had visibly brightened at his father's first remark, stuttered out in worry. Queen Priscilla, adding fuel to the fire, added, Curtis, I remember you've been slacking off on your sword lessons. Ah. Mom. That was supposed to be a secret. The fierce-looking prince tugged on his mother's sleeve as his eyes switched between his mother and father. Mama, can I have a pet? Ellie asked. Haha, I don't know. Monobeasts only want to be pets for nice ladies, my mom teased. Ellie is nice, right, brothers? She pulled on my sleeve, sending Ree and me out to battle on her behalf. Who knows? Shooting her an evil smile, I placed Sylvie on my sister's lap before she started crying. The 10th anniversary event ended without any further commotion beside the one that I caused, and the guards escorted all of us back downstairs. Upon reaching the storage room behind the stage, Uncle Vincent handed me and Ree a package wrapped in a black cloth. His, I presumed, had all the items we had requested for our adventure. The items that the king purchased were being hauled to the carriage by some of the workers. Thank you, Uncle Vincent, I said, feeling grateful for his help. Ree nodded in agreement. For everything you and your family have done for us, this is hardly enough, Vincent replied. Rimuru, Arthur, we have some swords in the back if you two want to take a look while you're here. They might not be anything special, but I'm sure you'll be able to find a solid sword to last you until your body finishes growing. Oh, are you planning on taking lessons with the sword? The king inquired, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. My boy has just started learning as well. Maybe you two can spar one day. Swords is but a mere hobby of mine, your majesty. I gave him a court bow. I could never hope to reach your son's level. Your majesty, Prince Curtis would only become infected with bad habits if he began sparring with mere commoners, Sebastian's hissy voice rang. I was about to rebuke Sebastian's comment when my father and the twin horns came in. Ah, you guys are here. How did you enjoy the auction? My father exclaimed, picking up Ellie after showing his respects to the king and queen. He pulled Vincent aside and began debriefing about the events with the twin horns. Your majesty, if I may have a word with you, I heard Sebastian say as he leaned closely to the king's ear. After a few moments, King Glader shot his royal guard an irritated glance, but let out a sigh. Oh no, I have a bad feeling about this. As the two walked towards me, it was obvious what they had just discussed by the way Sebastian wasn't even looking at us, but instead, at my brother's bond. However, instead of talking to Ree, the king called upon my father. The king smiled at him, but his eyes remained stern. I never did catch your name. You must be this young boy's father, correct? He affirmed rather than asked. My name is Reynolds Lewin, and yes, that is the case. What might be the matter, your majesty? My father replied, lowering himself slightly. Sebastian, here, has been a royal guard for a while now and has helped our family an uncountable amount of times. His voice stayed relaxed. He spoke to my father, but the condescension in his tone was still apparent. For the exemplary services he has provided me, and therefore the country, I do feel the need to reward him at times. You see, he has taken a fancy to your son's bond. I know it's not easy to sever a contract, and I'm sure the boy has grown close to his little pet, but I would be more than willing to hire a mage to take care of the contract and compensate you and your family for the troubles. Why, your majesty, my father stuttered, caught by surprise by the severe request. Taking a glance at the visibly pissed Rimuru, he turned back to the king. I must apologize, your majesty. Neither I nor my wife had anything to do with my son's bond. He had acquired it himself, so I cannot speak on my son's behalf on matters of his bond. The king turned his attention to our direction, regarding us, or Ree, loftily, and I suddenly realized that he was returning his gaze. I realized, then, that for the entirety of their conversation, he had been staring icily at him and his guard. Boy, didn't your father teach you to lower your gaze when speaking to someone of your superior? Sebastian snarled in disdain as he slammed the end of his metal staff to the ground. Sebastian, silence. The king held up his hand. Besides the royal family and their guards, the king's request had caught the attention of the rest of my family as well as Helste's. Hello, child. The king approached, standing an arm's length away from Ree. I'm sure you've just heard me speak to your father, so I won't repeat myself. How about it? My royal armory would certainly have a sword befitting that of any aspiring young knight. I refuse, Rimuru replied, his voice laced with annoyance. Sebastian was about to interrupt, but an emotionless glare from me shut him up. The king spoke again with a much more impatient tone. How about a trade then? The world lion cub that I just purchased for your bond. Father. Curtis scurried over to his father, pulling on his sleeve. I thought the mana beast was mine? Ignoring his son, the king waited for my response. Perhaps I didn't make myself clear, Rimuru said, his tone growing increasingly cold. My bond is not some trinket that can be bought or sold. She is a living creature, and a dear daughter to me. I will not give her up, no matter what the compensation may be. Reiterated, failing to mask the annoyed expression on his face. I have asked you twice, child, for a favor. Twice, he emphasized, his tone growing grave. I will ask you once more, will you give me your bond? Rimuru was clearly losing his patience, his eyes showing the signs of an impending explosion. It was apparent that the king's persistence was affecting him, and Rimuru was struggling to contain his anger. It seemed that Rimuru was trying hard not to demolish, not only this place, but the entire city. Less than Rimuru isn't stable right now, take over before he destroys everything. Greater than. A voice suddenly spoke in my head. It reminded me of the way Sylvia used to communicate with me at that time, but I couldn't pinpoint who it was. Despite not knowing the identity of the voice, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I could trust it. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, standing protectively in front of Ri. Then let me ask you a question in response instead of my brother, Your Majesty. How much are you willing to sell your children to me? I asked coolly, never batting an eye. Thrown off guard, the king wasn't able to respond to the seemingly random question. You have asked him twice and he have rejected you both times, yet it seems your pride won't allow you to accept his refusal. You don't seem to be aware of what you were asking him, so I hope to clarify using my question instead. How much money should I give you in return for your son or your daughter, King Glader? I rephrased, without wavering. I heard the sharp whistle of a sword leaving its scabbard. Insolent peasant. You dare insult the king and his family? Two guards roared as he charged at me and Ri before anyone had the chance to respond. The guard's expression twisted into one of unbridled rage as my bored expression seemed to enrage him even further. As his sword arced towards us, I couldn't help but notice a faint glow of mana surrounding it. Augmenting his sword to attack two 7-year-olds. This guy showed no tact. The hood covering the guard's face was blown back as he charged towards me, revealing a rugged veteran's furious expression. A collective gasp of horror rippled through the onlookers as they witnessed the guard's unprecedented act of aggression. The twin horns, desperate to intervene, fight against the surge of panic filling the air, attempting to reach us before the blade cleaved me in two. Even the king, who had initially appeared surprised by his guard's actions, now wore a stunned expression, while the queen frantically reached for her wand, prepared to intervene. My eyes fixed on the guard, icy calm replacing any hint of fear. Whether it was his anger clouding his judgment or the subpar training typical of royal guards, his attack was rushed and full of openings. I didn't even need to consciously will mana into my body to deal with him. Utilizing the opposing momentum between us, I smoothly swung my fist, connecting squarely with the guard's unaugmented face. The look of surprise that swept across the faces of the royal family and their guards was palpable. However, my attention quickly shifted as I sensed danger emanating from the court mage, Sebastian. Just as I had anticipated, the dense fool was silently muttering a spell, his beady eyes locked intently with mine. Channeling mana into my core, I focused not on casting a spell or augmenting myself, but on tapping into my beast will. Activating the first phase of my beast will, static void, I enveloped both him and myself outside the confines of this world's time. The environment shifted, casting the surroundings into monochrome hues. I started to walk to the smug-looking guard. He probably thought that child couldn't do anything to him. He was so happy at the thought of taking Sylvie from us that he didn't even realize that the world was monochrome and the spell he was preparing had dissolved. He attempted to unleash his spell, only to be met with utter failure. What? He responded, fear gradually replacing his previous smug expression. It won't work, I spoke in an emotionless voice, every word dripping with an air of terrifying calmness. My gaze bore into the guard's soul, piercing through the remnants of his shattered confidence. Though he towered over me, my unwavering aura and posture made it appear as though I were looking down on him from a great height, diminishing him to little more than an insignificant pebble in my path. Spells that rely on ambient mana as their fuel are rendered ineffective, I added coolly. It would be in everyone's best interest if you abandoned your futile endeavor to take my brother-daughter away. My commanding presence left no room for argument, instilling such terror in the guard that he felt his very core quiver. Stay back. Why you think that you are a challenge for me? I'm the king's personal court mage. He stuttered out, attempting to salvage his crumbling confidence. In this state, yes, I replied, striding purposefully toward him. In a swift, calculated motion, I snapped his shinbone backward, causing him to scream in excruciating agony. The intensity of his cries seemed to strip away layers of his soul. My body was starting to feel weak and I knew I was starting to reach the limit of using the acquire phase of my beast will. Stepping away from him, I returned to my original position before you saying, static void, as to not draw any suspicion and glancing back at the once proud royal guard, now writhing in torment on the ground, I stared him down. Remember. No, I uttered, my voice dripping with disdain and superiority. Your place. And just then, the exertion of tapping into my beast will began to take its toll on me, the strain on my body becoming unbearable. I could feel my strength waning, my legs trembling beneath me as if they could no longer bear my weight. Just as I teetered on the brink of collapse, someone's gentle arms caught me. You did exceptionally well. Leave the remainder to me. That was the last thing I heard before I passed out.